The establishment called Nigeria. You know, I have a series on this page where I talk about the country that is not ours, Nigeria. Let's talk about ownership. Every establishment has an owner, and an owner, whether he runs a shop, a company, or a country, has one obligation above every other: protect the interest. That's not cynicism. That's just what ownership means. And when we talk about the establishment called Nigeria, we are talking about the people, foreign and local, who sit closest to the resources and who will do almost anything to keep their hands on the tap. That's the foundation. Nothing shifts it easily. Now picture an upright man walking into that establishment. He looks around and says, "This is our land, our soil, our oil, our gold, our people. We deserve the wealth beneath our own soil." To him, that is justice. But to the owner of the establishment, that sentence is a threat. Because the moment someone says, "We own this," they are by definition touching someone else's interest. So, here's the pattern history kept showing us. The establishment doesn't need a good man in charge. It needs a manageable man. A tyrant who kills but never touches the pipeline is safer to them than a patriot who protects his people but threatens the flow of the resources. This isn't speculation, it is documented. In 1961, Patrice Lumumba became the first prime minister of an independent Congo. His crime, in the eyes of outside powers, wasn't corruption or brutality. It was that he wanted Congo's copper, cobalt, and diamonds to serve Congolese people first. US Senate's own church committee later confirmed the CIA treated his removal as an urgent and prime objective. The classified cables described assassination plots. Belgium's government has formally apologized for its role in his death. He wasn't murdered for being a bad leader. He was murdered for being a nationalist one. In 1983, Thomas Sankara took power in Burkina Faso and did the unthinkable. He refused foreign debt terms, nationalized land and mineral wealth, made the country food self-sufficient in 4 years, and told his people to build their own future without begging for it. In 1987, he was assassinated in a coup led by his own best friend and second in command, a man named Blaise Compaoré. France's own parliamentary inquiry has since acknowledged a measure of political responsibility for the climate that surrounded his death. Now here is the part I want you to sit with. Compaoré went on to rule Burkina Faso for the next 27 years, not as a reformer, as what political scientists call a coup-installed autocrat. He built a personal presidential guard to crush dissent. He was tied to a journalistic assassination. His family enriched itself while the country he ruled stayed near the very bottom of global human development ranking. And through nearly all of it, he was treated by Western power as a reliable partner, a peace broker, a man they could do business with, in Paris and in Washington alike. Nobody organized a Senate committee to investigate removing him. Nobody called his death an urgent objective. He wasn't touching the interest. He was protecting it. That is the contrast. In one country, with one betrayer, the nationalist who fed his people was killed within 4 years. The strong man who sold them out ruled for 27 years. And it's not unique to Burkina Faso. In 1953, Mohamed Mosaddegh, Iran's elected prime minister, nationalized the country's oil industry. Oil that until then had been controlled by a British company on terms that barely benefited the Iranian people. Within months, the CIA and British intelligence engineered a coup that removed him. The CIA has since publicly admitted its role. In its place, the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was restored to the throne. And he ruled Iran as an autocrat for the next 26 years with a secret police force, SAVAK, that jailed and tortured his political opponents. And through all 26 of those years, the Shah was one of the West's closest allies in the region, armed, funded, and defended because he kept the oil flowing on terms they liked. Mosaddegh, a democratically elected reformer, lasted about 2 years before he was removed. The Shah, an autocrat, was propped up for over 2 decades. Different continents, different decades, same trigger, and the same reward system. Touch the interest, and you're gone within years. Protect the interest, and it doesn't matter what else you do to your own people. You can rule for a generation. So how does the establishment protect itself when the whole world is watching? And it can't just openly gun down every nationalist who rise. It doesn't need to. It has a quieter weapon: division, religion, ethnicity, language, region. Keep the people fighting each other, and they will never unite long enough to ask the one question that actually threatens the owner. Whose resources are these really? That's why an upright man struggles to survive in that establishment. To be upright is to be a nationalist. And a nationalist, a man who genuinely loves his people and wants to build for them, becomes a target the moment he starts governing for them instead of just through them. It doesn't matter if he wears agbada or khaki, if he is civilian or a soldier. The moment the posture shifts from managing the system to challenging it, he becomes exposed. Which brings us to now. Peter Obi, in an interview on July 8th this year, said he isn't sure he'll be alive to contest the 2027 election. The presidency responded quickly, calling the claim fabricated and dismissing it as exaggeration. I am not standing here telling you I have proof of a plot against Peter Obi. I have no evidence of that, and I would pretend I do. What I am telling you is this: the fear itself fits a shape we have seen before. Lumumba felt the walls closing in before they closed it on him. Sankara knew he was being watched. History does not repeat exactly, but it rhymes close enough that when a nationalist voice says, "I fear for my life," it deserves to be taken seriously, not laughed off. An account, one that I have posted here before, of the elder statesman Maita Misule, recalling a moment when a foreign officer told him plainly, Nigeria will never be allowed to industrialize on its own terms. Testimony from a man of his status carries its own weight, and it echoes exactly what the paper trail already showed us elsewhere. For example, the Kissinger report. So what do we do with all of this? If this country ever produced another genuine nationalist, a leader who actually put his people's ownership of their own wealth first, the protection of that leader can't be left to the same system that has every incentive to remove him. It has to become the responsibility of the people themselves, because the loophole that let wicked men seize power aren't accidents. They are exactly what left standing when good men are removed, and nobody was watching closely enough to stop it. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is a pattern, documented, repeated, and still playing out in front of us. Don't chase the noise. Reclaim the pattern and watch closely who they let live and who they let rule. My name is Inye. Know the truth and say it anyway. If Nigeria must progress, its people must wake up to stand beside a leader who is a nationalist, who has your good at heart, who is not here to plunder you, but to give you and your children a better future. Our greatest weapon is unity. The earlier, the better for us all.